When we think of brilliant chess players, names like Garry Kasparov, Hikaru Nakamura, or Magnus Carlsen usually come to mind. Their greatness is undeniable. But what about the legendary players of the past? Many of their games helped define the art of chess and inspired generations of attacking players. In today's video, I'm going to show you two of the greatest chess games played by Adolf Anderssen, a German chess genius born in the early 19th century, with the last game being the legendary Evergreen Game, widely regarded as the greatest chess game of all time. Let's start with this incredible game that Anderssen played against Lionel Kieseritzky in 1851, which later became known as the Immortal Game of chess. The game starts with white advancing the king's pawn 2 squares forward and black mirroring the move. Anderssen decides to play one of the most aggressive gambits possible, the King's Gambit, a very popular option at the time that led to interesting positions very quickly. Kieseritzky accepts the gambit by capturing the pawn, and white quickly develops his bishop to c4, employing the popular bishop's gambit. Black checks Adolf by moving his queen to h4, forcing white's king to escape to f1. Kieseritzky advances his b-pawn forward, which is known as the Brian counter gambit, aiming to gain activity at the cost of a pawn, and preparing to seize central control with c6 and d5 in the future. Anderssen captures the pawn with his bishop, and black develops his knight to f6. White develops his knight to f3, attacking the queen, which retreats to h6, but Anderssen still creates some diagonal pressure on it by moving his d-pawn. Black moves his knight to h5, with the dangerous threat of putting it on g3. White's knight jumps to h4 with the plan of going to f4. The queen shifts to g5, and Anderssen puts the knight just as he planned to. Kieseritzky pushes his c-pawn forward, attacking the bishop, and Anderssen responds by advancing his g-pawn, which might look silly, but in a moment you will understand this incredible idea. Black knight quickly retreats to f6, and white sacrifices the hanging bishop with rook to g1. Black takes the gift as many would have, but now the great idea of the German chess genius comes to life. He pushes his h-pawn forward, threatening the queen, and after it moves to g6, the queen gets blocked out of the game. White's queen shifts to f3, threatening to take the f4 pawn and trap the queen, so the knight is forced to retreat to g8. White captures the pawn with his bishop, and after black develops his bishop to c5, white's knight strikes d5, threatening forks and attacking the queen. Black grabs a pawn with his queen as he has nothing better to do, but Anderssen didn't want just the rook. He wanted to destroy his opponent by checkmate as quickly as possible. He played bishop to d6, sacrificing 2 rooks at the same time. If black tried to take the a8 rook with check, after king to e2, his queen is attacked, and Anderssen's mate is unstoppable. And if the queen would stay on the diagonal, there is a key move that Anderssen played in a moment, and white would be winning. Black decided to risk it all by taking the hanging rook on g8. But now the move comes, e5, giving away the second rook with the big idea of cutting the queen away from the defense of the black king. Anderssen simply has too many pieces in the attack and is threatening unstoppable mating attacks. Black accepted the gift of material, but it's just too late to save his king. Black tries to quickly develop the knight to coordinate the pieces, but it is simply too slow as the German chess player jumps to g7 with check. And now the final touch arrives. The queen sacrifices herself on f6, forcing black's knight to capture her. And finally, white's bishop moves to e7 to deliver a stunning checkmate, with white's minor pieces coordinating beautifully. But this game is not even considered the greatest game of Anderssen. This spot is reserved for the well-known Evergreen Game, which I'm going to show you right now. This game was played in 1851, and Anderssen played against Jean Dufresne, who was a great talented player and Adolf's student. The game once again starts with the king pawns advancing to the centre, but this time Anderssen decides to go with the well-known Italian game. Black mirrors the bishop move, but that only gives Anderssen what he wants. He goes b4, initiating the incredible Evans gambit, offering a pawn to gain rapid development and control of the centre. Dufresne accepts the gambit, and Anderssen follows up by moving his c-pawn to c3, aiming to establish a strong centre. Dufresne retreats his bishop to a5, maintaining pressure on the c3 pawn, and Anderssen pushes his pawn to d4, attacking the center as he planned. Black captures the pawn, and Anderssen castles kingside, securing his king's safety and sacrificing another pawn for the quick development of his rook. Dufresne advances his pawn to d3, attempting to disrupt Adolf's development and gain space, but Anderssen responds by moving his queen to b3, attacking the f7 pawn and threatening bishop to a3 if black would have defended with queen to e7. Dufresne moves his queen to f6, defending the f7 pawn and preparing to develop more pieces, but Anderssen pushes his pawn forward to e5, attacking the queen and gaining more space in the center. Black retreats his queen to g6, and white develops his rook to e1, increasing pressure by aligning it with Jean's king. Black develops his knight, and after bishop to a3, he advances his pawn to b5, offering a counter-sacrifice to activate his rook on a8 with a tempo. Anderssen captures the pawn with his queen, and Jean moves his rook to b8 as he planned. White responds by shifting his queen to a4, and Dufresne retreats his bishop to b6, defending the a7 pawn and putting pressure on f2. Anderssen develops his knight on d2, preparing to bring it into the attack, and Dufresne moves his bishop to b7, putting his bishop on an active diagonal, but he's delaying castling, which you generally shouldn't do if your opponent gives away pawns for piece activity, and he will regret doing this shortly after. The German genius advances his knight to e4, increasing pressure on black's position and preparing to bring more pieces into the attack. Black moves his queen to f5, aligning it with f2 to threat some potential attacks, but Anderssen captures the d3 pawn with his bishop, creating threats on the queen. Dufresne shifts his queen to h5, and Adolf displays his aggressive style. He jumps his knight to f6, delivering a check and forcing black to capture and open the e-file for Anderssen's rook. However, this move also opened a line for an attack for black, which Jung quickly takes advantage of with rook to g8, targeting white's knight as the g-pawn is now pinned. But this video is about Anderssen for a reason, and he displays brilliancy once again with rook to d1, ignoring the hanging knight and threatening a beautiful combination which is about to come. It also perfectly shows how important it is to bring every piece into the game when starting an attack. Dufresne captures the knight, falling right into the trap, and Anderssen starts by beautifully sacrificing his rook on e7. If the king ignores the rook and slides to d1, it ends up in forced checkmate after another sacrifice on d7, continued by bishop to f5, because there is an unstoppable mate that you will see in a moment. But wait, what about another king escaping move? It turns out the only move is another sacrifice on d8, because of the same pattern with bishop to f5. If the rook takes, we simply take the queen, and if the knight takes, well, that's a challenge for you to solve this brilliant combination in the comments. Dufresne captures the rook with his knight, but this was all planned by Anderssen. He brilliantly sacrifices his queen by taking the pawn and forcing black into the nasty bishop f5 with double check, and after Dufresne shifts his king to e8. The German genius ends the game with this stunning double bishop checkmate. If you want to see more brilliant games of Anderssen, I just posted a video with a bonus game on my second channel, and you can click on it right now.